All right, I'm gonna switch views here. Perfect. Well, welcome everybody near and very far. Again, thank you so much, those of us joining us on the East Coast. I'm Megan Marshall, and I'm the director of the Hugh C. Hyde Living Writers series. And I'm excited to welcome our featured guest, who is not only a stellar author, but also a distinguished SDSU MFA alum. Yes. And as mentioned, she's joining us all the way from Pennsylvania and has stayed up very late to read for us virtually this evening. So for that, we are especially grateful. Before I introduce her, I do want to take a moment to thank all of those who have helped to make this series and this event possible. And that includes the great Markle Tumlin, my fabulous co-host, and our other friends from Love Library, Danya Muka Hall, Laurel Bliss, and Rebecca Williamson. And I also want to thank the Department of English and Comparative Literature at SDSU for their continued support of this series. So just a couple reminders. I think this is definitely at this point not our first Zoom rodeo, but please do keep your mic muted during the presentation. And for those of you maybe who just joined us, know that the event is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. If you'd like to view the recording after the event, please check out the Hugh C. Hyde Living Writers series on YouTube. I'm going to throw the link in the chat maybe a little bit later. And in addition to tons of other cool videos, student content, other recordings from past events, so a lot of really great stuff on our YouTube channel. Please check it out. Once the reading portion has concluded, I will open it up to some questions. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our featured author. Tara Stillions Whitehead is a multi-genre writer and filmmaker. After working on 2 #1 primetime television shows, Tara left Hollywood to pursue scholarship in writing that subverts celebrity worship and the dangerous narratives promoted by mainstream American media. Tara's writing has been published in or is forthcoming from various journals, magazines, and anthologies, including Cream City Review, Chicago Review, Pithead Chapel, Jellyfish, and Monkeybicycle, amongst many others. She's assistant professor of film, video, and digital media production at Messiah University, where she is also faculty for the renowned Young Writers Workshop. Tara's writing has been included in the Wigleaf Top 50, has been nominated for Best of the Net, the AWP Intro Journals Award, and a Pushcart Prize. She's the recipient of a Glimmer Train Press Award for new writers. Her hybrid chapbook, Blood Histories, was just released this year from Galileo Press. Yes. And her full-length collection, The Year of the Monster, is forthcoming from Unsolicited Press next year. So keep an eye out for that one. When reading the brilliant vignettes in Tara's chapbook, Blood Histories, I was reminded of a line from the great poet Muriel Rukeyser. What would happen if one woman told the truth about her life? The world would split open. The lives of the dynamic characters in Blood Histories have indeed been split, fractured in some way, and these fissures reveal hard truths and timeless yet timely themes of trauma, grief, and innocence lost. But they remind us that in order to build, sometimes we must first break. That despite all, we can save ourselves from the world's fatal ideas and blood histories and learn to overcome. Of the book, author Brenna Wilmer states, there are lines in this collection that no one has written before, that perhaps no one has ever even thought, but has only felt. So please join me in welcoming Tara Stillions Whitehead. Yay!
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 I should unmute first before I say anything. Thank you so much for that introduction. I had a panic moment of things froze. So hopefully my internet should be good now. But I want to thank you so much, Megan and Markle, for putting this on, keeping this series alive and inviting me back. I remember going to, attending this series about a decade ago when I was a student at San Diego State. And it's really such a thrill to be back with my first book. And that was just a stellar introduction. So I really want to thank you for that. So I'm just going to jump into the reading. I'm going to read from Blood Histories. I do have 1 or 2 short things I'd like to read from The Year of the Monster, and another unpublished work. But to get started with Blood Histories, I think I'll just start reading. So I prefer to read off of this screen in Zoom readings. It's a lot easier for me than using the book and navigating. So I hope that's okay with everyone. So I may not see if you're flagging me or anything like that. So I wanted to start off. Actually, I want to start off with, I just received a notification 5 minutes before this Zoom meeting that one of the pieces was nominated for this year's Best of the Net, and that's Undertow. And I think that's actually a great place to start with the reading tonight. And so I will, once I pull it up here in a second, begin with Undertow. We pinned their name tags to our knitted sacks: Reynolds, Solomon, Childs, Kennedy. We wrote their room numbers on our wrists and waited for them in the cement benches near the commandant's office. We sat with our legs crossed, condoms in our hip pockets. They marched the line in their parade uniforms. We tracked sand from dorm to bedroom sheets. Our mothers washed their civvies and kept them in the guest room or the pool house, convinced we were the ones doing the civilizing. There were boys whose names we couldn't share, boys whose names we'd seen taped inside other girls' lockers, boys whose hips were like riptides, boys with thirsty eyes, boys in beach stairwells and stolen cars, boys in bathroom stalls above the fire pits at Coyote, behind the air hockey tables in Mr. Peabody's. Wharton, Clausen, Holt, Phelps. We carried their desire. We carried the sea. When they were expelled or graduated or disappeared, we framed their names with the Christmas lights on our bulletin boards. We cocooned ourselves in our salty air bedrooms and drank wine coolers and collaged, high on unspent touch, sweating them out like a forever hangover. Eschholtz, Brady, Coy. We kept their parents' secrets and sent them encrypted letters, silently thanked God for cigarettes and earthquakes in all things California. It is November and my children are on their way home from school. I write the names on a legal pad with my stick figure portrait and a long past pediatrician appointment scribbled in the corner. Heineman, Daltz, Prescott, Gregory. The spellings don't look right. I dig through the box harboring those fugitive years and find photos too blurry for confirmation. I read an article about the commandant who gave whiskey to the boys and took them home. It explains nothing and recalls everything. The cadet who drowned in the Undertow by the academy barracks, the dime bags he kept in his beret, the upperclassman who would fuck me so long as I didn't touch him back, his moaning in the beach stairwell, my fingers blistering on the chain link fence, his blank unrecognition when I saw him at the winter formal. There was the freshman from Texas who sold pills, the chaplain's son who bought and could not stop taking the pills, the junior officer who drank a handle of Popov and told us what had been done to him, the boy who slept with his rifle, the boy who fucked his rifle, the marksman who wrote poems and was sent to the desert. Somewhere in between, sometime after, there was the one who called to tell me he'd been released from San Quentin, to say he is not a boy anymore. The commandant's face is waxy like honeydew. His name, common as salt. The boys' names have been redacted, McKee and Smith and Wright, but I hear them, Webb and Fritz and O, calling from the Mariana Trench, whispering just below the surface, translating the language of sand far from the sea. Okay, so that was Undertow. It was originally published in X-Ray Lit Mag, which is a really awesome online literary magazine if you haven't checked it out yet. And I'm gonna read the title story. I haven't read that one in a while, which comes right afterwards in the collection, Blood Histories. This piece originally appeared in Bending Genres in December 2019, and is slightly different than that version. One of the things that was really remarkable about working with Galileo Press is working with Barrett Warner, who's just an amazing editor and who, I mean, out of any editor I've ever worked with, can really look at the work and just, he knows where to pull a preposition. He's so good at keeping the integrity of the work and the voice of the work while, you know, paring away words that weigh it down. So this is slightly different than its original version. So Blood Histories. A girl saved herself from history. How sweet she tastes is not important. Which parent sent her into the world? Inconsequential. She did the opposite of what she had always wanted, because what she had always wanted was going to kill her. And here's the truth. Desire kills many women. It is the disease of her gender. This her mother did tell her, but only because the girl's mother had wanted to be a pediatrician and, lucky for her, fell pregnant during medical school and never had to touch a sick child she couldn't possibly save. Such disappointment and helplessness would have triggered her metaphorical death, which everyone knows precedes a woman's bodily death. Do what I have done, her mother said, and you too can overcome. It wasn't just the girl's mother who tried to trick the girl with history. When she was 14 years old, the girl's anatomy teacher told her that a woman's blood holds all of the trauma of her past, of the past preceding her past, really of all time. And try as they might, physiologists and alienists and etiologists and evangelists had not been able to figure out how to cure the woman's body of its memory disease. Because of this, the teacher explained, a woman is genetically predisposed to self-destruct. For the record, the young woman had already discovered that history is created, not innate, that the world had injected her with its fatal ideas. The young woman had made this discovery when she told Declan Seeger she wasn't a virgin. She thought that telling him this would have made him less eager, lighter. Afterward, she decided that the beautiful dream from 3 nights before Declan trapped her in his father's hunting cabin, the dream where she and Khalid Monopolo made love in an electrical storm near Sedona, was her real first time. Declan Seeger would not write her history. While memory was beyond her control to modify, she did have perspective. And isn't that what history really was? A pronouncement of potentially oblique perspective. Desire, death. The young woman wanted to avoid making the world angry by doing all of the things it beseeched her to do. The foremost prerequisite being needing to be saved from danger. And if she wasn't in danger, well, to get into it as quickly as possible, climb in like a man into a dinghy and row into the middle of the ocean, burn the oars, set the whole boat on fire, do what she needed to do to become as helpless as she needed to become to require saving. So how did she save herself from the self that the blood poison tried to make her become? She became a physiologist, she became an alienist, she became an etiologist, she even became an evangelist. And once she became all of the things that had told her what she would become, she stopped becoming things altogether and stole a yacht. And she steered that yacht into the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, where one day she sighted something obsidian cresting against the divine intersection of sea and cloudless sky. As she sailed nearer to it, the spot grew larger and less abstract. At a distance of 1 nautical mile, the young woman knew the spot to be a yacht-sized hole in the otherwise idyllic seascape. One might have expected the young woman to turn around, to flee the hole, because it was dark and unlikely and possessed the unknown, which could put her great success at risk. But the young woman, who was not so young anymore, recognized the yacht-sized hole as true danger. This was what she had been looking for. The young etio-physio alien evangelist pressed enthusiastically forward right into that darkness. She was certain that another woman, young, old, purple, brown, peril is indiscriminate, was in there, and that having saved herself, from self-destruction, from the world's fatal ideas and false blood histories, she could teach that woman how to overcome. That was an example. I was reading that and thinking, the part where it says she stole a yacht, I had originally had she bought a yacht. And that was a conversation with my editor where he says, no, 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 this woman, she's not going to steal a yacht, or she's not going to buy a yacht. She's going to steal a yacht. And I said, damn it if you aren't right, Barrett. So that was like just such, it was such synergy working with him. He's such a wonderful human. I should feel so lucky. Okay. I am gonna read a short piece from actually the opening piece from The Year of the Monster. So The Year of the Monster is a full-length collection that's coming out September 27th, 2022. And it's technically my first book, but it just comes out second. So I don't know if that'll end up coming up in Q&A later, but that book I actually started when I was in the MFA program at San Diego State. So there are works from when I was there in that collection. And it is a collection of short stories and script hybrids. And the piece I'm going to read from it, although where did it go? Is the opening piece, and it appeared in the Rupture, which used to be the Collagist. It was in their first issue as the Rupture in 2020, and it's called Inciting Moment. Fade in on a craftsman split into 2 units, 406 square feet each, tucked into Franklin Hill, the neighborhood at the center of your notion of making it. The Hill is much like everything else in Hollywood. High culture tinged with artistic travesty, gratuitousness flanked by poverty, legend enmeshed with tenacious ideation. You sell 10 liters of plasma, your 91 Dodge Colt antique record player, the diamond studs your late grandfather gifted you for your 12th birthday. You default on your student loans and eat rice noodles and sriracha for 3 weeks. It only takes 3 weeks. $90 in application fees, a $50 credit check, $100 Westside rental subscription, first and last month's rent, and a $150 non-refundable parking deposit. $4,290 later, you can call yourself a Los Angelina. Bukowski drew a penis in our bathroom, you boast to the first man you sleep with on the memory foam futon. You cannot be more embarrassing in your pride as you reveal the pocket door and trace your finger around the fleshy sword like its victory is your own. You are suddenly a palimpsest of strangeness appropriated from strangeness. You quickly become part of the elite group of people who identify by intersections or freeway exits. DeLong, Pree, and Hyperion for east of La Brea locals, 101 in Vermont for your contacts south of Wilshire, 134 in Los Feliz for your free women's clinic in Reseda. There is not much space to self-reflect in the shotgun kitchen, and you battle the nagging feeling that there will never be a place that you can call home anymore. At night, you admire the city skyline to the south and imagine what it looked like in 1937 when the house was built. You've seen Chinatown. You know these hills were sprawling headstones above a city draped in desert darkness. You would have been able to trace Cassiopeia in the northern sky. You would have slipped into bed beneath the paramour's haunted glow. The tenants upstairs are not married and keep their folding chairs stationed on the tarmac that extends over the garage below the house, which is an extension of your very unusable front lawn. You hear them fight and make up through the gossamer thin floors more than a dozen times before the second rent check is due. By the 3rd month, you hear nothing. Hot water pipes and deadbolts on occasion. You sleep with the man not long after, during the 2007 writers' strike. The studios are paralyzed and the city is restless. It is the first time you see an uncircumcised penis. You are drunk enough to recite a few too many poems from Love is a Dog from Hell, and between orgasms, he says he would not have pegged you for a Bukowski fan and attempts to guess your Myers-Briggs type and rising sign. You are tempted to show him the pocket door, but then he discloses that he is an insurance broker who played lacrosse on a sports scholarship at Duke until he injured himself during rush week. And this intensely ruins your fantasy, and you wish you'd never had a drink in your long, young life. 3 weeks later, he's climbing through your basement window, 2 days into a cocaine bender, and atomized by loneliness and desire. He perches at the end of your bed and recites Billy Collins poems until you have to leave for work. The strike is over, you tell him. There's a lot of catching up to do. In the styrofoam darkness of stage rehearsals, you realize you allowed his phone calls and text messages to go unanswered a little too long. You should have said something after he threatened to throw himself off the tarmac, after he misspelled your name for the 10th time. Walking out of your first full week back at the storyboards, you have your first real industry epiphany, and the thought of someone loving you becomes more claustrophobic than the 406 square feet you still cannot call home. Hollywood's about to go on strike again, so that seemed a little relevant, to say the least. Thank you. I see the little claps. I'd like to read a short piece from They More Than Burned. So I think I'll probably read two more pieces. One from this. They More Than Burned is a chat book that I have out on submission right now. It just kind of came out of nowhere. But the first piece in it, I don't think I've ever actually read this one out loud, was published in the McNeese Review this last year. And it's called When an Alcoholic Falls from the Sky. When an alcoholic falls from the sky, there is no equation for calculating where and when she will land, because in every story but this one, she never does. When the time comes to surrender, it won't feel like rock bottom, because in the end, it's not about the rock or the bottom. Death has no altitude. Instead, it will feel like another long drive home. It will feel like a balloon that can hold more air. Like if you could just turn yourself inside out, there you would finally be. I'm 2 months sober when the first snow falls. I meet strangers in night churches and witness testimonies about lifted obsession. I eat the candy and cry into the coffee. I don't tell anyone that I'm afraid. Obsession is all I have. Stay in the middle of the herd, Steve M. says one night, pulling a wallet from his back pocket. He's wearing an Akubra cattleman hat and aviators and doesn't crowd me the way other men in these rooms have. From a bundle of cards secured with a rubber band, he offers me a hand-drawn picture. Some are grazing, some are frolicking. Do buffalo frolic? And some are, by all obvious artistic intentions, lost. As I shovel a pouch of M&Ms into my mouth, Steve hands me a figurine and points to the bottom of the drawing where a solitary brown splotch wanders near an uncertain scribble labeled cliff. You find yourself here, you call someone who can help you get back to the herd. If no one answers, you put that under your tongue, so long as you can't, codeine, cocaine, Klonopin, cooking sherry, Listerine, and Coricidin. Only another alcoholic can understand it. If I'd known the last drink would be my last, I never would have stopped. When a helicopter falls from the sky in the night 3 streets away from our Cape Cod, no one is there to see it except God. Nothing is there to stop it except the jungle gym and a sugar maple, some half-bloom matchsticks of goldenrod. I'm in a bed that isn't mine, dreaming I am on the wrong flight to Alaska, the empty fuselage hydraulicking over Saskatchewan. I'm drunk and standing the flight attendant and his tiny bottles of Crown Royal. And like all drunk dreams, I'm using with the intent to fuck someone. I tell the attendant that if we're gonna die, I need him to come inside of me first. Dream drinking is not unlike real drinking. In both, obsession and excess unite, blaze, flash over. The cabin lights flicker. The flight attendant abandons his cart and takes me across a row of empty seats. He tells me the turbulence scares him, so I pull him all the way inside of me like a secret, explain that we will be transcending the darkness soon, that we are flying so fast, we are silencing the sound before it can catch us. The orgasm wakes me up, and the bed sheets are soaked like they used to be. I get up before the kids and run 7 miles through the fog, unsure if I'm still sober. At mile 2, I find the propeller in a ditch where I used to dump my bottles in neatly tied grocery bags. At mile 3, I find the smaller than expected exoskeleton emptied of its passengers. At mile 5, I'm convinced that I'm drunk and the attendant is still inside of me, and that shame is prophecy. If you Google things falling from the sky, you can frighten your obsession into distraction. Boiled bats, venison, spiders, suitcases, starfish, baby shoes, blood oranges, needles, and tree frogs. I'm not so much afraid to fly as I am to fall. Physics promises us that everything, even clouds, come back to Earth. All bodies have a terminal velocity. Nothing escapes physics except God and black holes, and maybe a little bit of the devil. When a 2014 Jetta falls from the sky, downing 2 telephone poles and leveling several cement mailboxes, I'm asleep in a bed that isn't mine, dreamless. I'm expecting lightning when I descend the stairs and emerge barefoot into the asphalt darkness. At first, the capsized vehicle in a constellation of picket fencing and windshield glass looks like every car I've ever owned. But as I move closer, I can see I'm not the one at fault. One neighbor is picking up pieces of mailbox from 4 houses down. I approach a heavyset man in a monocored shirt bending over the driver's side window. With the streetlights out, it's so dark, I can't see who's inside. Are they okay? I whisper, thinking he is real, thinking I'm not dreaming. The man looks at me, confused, as if I'm a cloud to be passed through. And though I have never seen him before, I know who he is, that there is no one inside of the car, and that he is still falling. The electricity is out when I get home. Everyone is still asleep. I salivate and think maybe I am too. I don't know. By the light of my phone, I dig through the shit in my steel case, candy wrappers, mini DV tapes, safety pins, shot glasses, phone chargers, photos, air fresheners, until I find the tiny buffalo, and I place it under my tongue. It tastes like royal pine and sheet metal, the latex hard but clinical. I say fall, but it comes out fool. I say shit, and it comes out sit. Because I know what happens when I don't follow directions, I drop to the floor. I wrangle the tiny buffalo with my tongue, count and recount its stubborn legs as I turn my body into a human airstrip, so that when the ceiling cracks open, Grace can make its emergency landing. Okay. I don't know, should I end with one more from Blood Histories, or are we like, should this be a good time to stop?
I mean, you could read another from Blood Histories if you'd like.
I think I'll do, yeah, I think I'll read Circles and Spheres and Other Well-Rounded Objects.
Yes.
And then that'll be the way to go out.
Beautiful. Yeah, and it looks like in the comments, everyone agrees that
Okay, good. All right.
One more.
So this went through working with Barrett, who is a poet. And Galileo Press has been around since the 70s, and they just started putting out books again. But this was definitely a fun point of contention with how to revise this piece, which originally appeared in Pithead Chapel. But I like the form that it's in now in Blood Histories. So yeah, anyway, it was fun to work with. Okay, thank you guys for being so patient, because I know sitting for like 30 minutes listening to somebody read is not always very easy. Circles and Spheres and Other Well-Rounded Objects. This is how you calculate infinity, how you get different results by doing the same thing over and over, how you remain dizzy long after the spinning stops, how you begin living after a lifetime contemplating death. Here is where to point your finger when you want to blame God, how to hold a fired AR-15 accountable, how to settle for less so that you can make room for more. This is the crystal you smoke when you want to become a new person. This is the sand you snort when you want to find the old one. These are the places to touch when you stop feeling like yourself and are contemplating those bottles of vanilla and mouthwash. This is how to listen when no one is talking, how to start a fire without dryer lint or light bulbs, how to unwrap a wound you didn't know was a wound, and how to not die trying. Here are the ingredients for the perfect storm, the hiding places where you can lose yourself. This is how to unlock your front door on days when the world is going to end, how to wear hope inside out like a shirt that isn't yours. This is how you open a child's chest and vacuum the glitter out. This is how you fill a child with the world they will have to fix. This is how you collect the broken glass when a child's work is done, how you teach broken glass to make a window, how you teach broken glass to make a mirror. This is how you use a window to learn from the past, how you use a mirror to see the future. And here is how to wade through an ocean that isn't yours, how to live in the sunlight without casting shadows, how to interpret your grandmother's tongues. This is how to love the child who comes from blood muscle. This is how to love the child who comes from the space between loneliness and urge. This is how to love the child who is rotten before the harvest and hollowed of seed. How children from broken geometries find their own symmetry outside of circles and spheres and other well-rounded objects. This is how you get the laces even on the first try, how to turn your desire into land and your body into prayer. This is how to stay clean when there is no water, how to pray when there is no one awake. Here is how to read lines that are neither fine nor oblique, lines without knots or surface tension, lines too heavy, cast too deep. Here is the word you were looking for, the sentence without the metaphor, the lover you never fucked. Here is how to write indeterminately, how to bury an unfinished story before it becomes a story, and how to forgive yourself for not wanting it to end. Thank you.
Beautiful, Tara. Feel free to unmute yourselves and give a real round of applause so we can hear it.
That's great.
Aww. Oh, my dad's here. Hi, Dad. I made sure every single story I read had the F word in it, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, you know, that's the way things go.
My dad
I
lives
never
in
heard of that.
Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Welcome from Alaska.
But thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Had to make sure that we got dinner in before this happened.
I know. Well, it's important. Need some sustenance
Yes.
to enjoy Tara's reading. Well, thank you so much, Tara. And it's wonderful to hear some new stuff as well, you know, and congrats on the Year of the Monster coming out next year. So exciting. I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about that, but I want to open up the floor now for some questions. I know that my students have some, and then of course, anyone who's joining us, if you would like to ask a question, probably the easiest way is to use a little hand raise function, or you can throw something into the chat and we can try to get to as many as possible with the time that we have. So.
Oh, Erin's here. Sorry, someone from my MFA program is here.
Yes, Erin. Hey, Erin. Okay, so I think I saw Viviana's hand first. Viviana, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, there we go. Hi.
There you go.
Hi, it's great to meet you.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, in your writing, how much is everything that you write sort of autobiographical or like taken from your own life? Because just reading your writing was so interesting.
So yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that comes up a lot when people talk about like creative nonfiction and autofiction and whatnot. I think all writers obviously pull from their observations and personal life experiences. Most of the works in Blood Histories have some sort of tie into autobiography, but I think that for me, something that I learned early on is I have to determine whether something I need to serve the story itself and what it wants to be versus like a testimony of sorts, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think most of the stories in Blood Histories, I believe, were originally published as creative nonfiction, minus Blood Histories and ornithology, obviously, as I'm not a bird. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it's pulled from personal experience. But I have a colleague who hates Mary Oliver, and he teaches in the English department. And he lets everybody know he hates Mary Oliver. And I mentioned to him about like her life and like how it precipitated into a conversation about people's lives being interesting and that being the material. And he actually said something very intelligent. And he said, you know, all that matters is having an interesting inner life. So that just ties into, I guess, like for me, the inner life is obviously connected to the external life too and life experiences, but it all blends together. I don't know if that made sense.
Thank you. Well, who hates Mary Oliver though?
Yeah, I forget. I was going in the direction of talking about like her life story and her life experience or something like that. Like anyway. And then we're talking about like writers with interesting and dramatic lives and those without it. Yeah.
But I mean, I appreciate the comment though about an interesting inner life. I think that translates very well to what we end up putting on the page.
Yeah, a lot of my creative writing students or writing students are always like, I never had anything like really dramatic happen in my life, or not even just students, but other writers who say things like, I've never experienced this type of pain. And so I feel like I can't write that way. And it's, you know, like it's a necessity, you know, it's definitely a touchstone, but it's for some people, but it's not a necessity. The inner life is what's important. The ability to empathize and observe.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well stated. All right, I think next up with the question is Arnisha and friends. Or wait, okay.
I love that they're all together, like hanging out.
Viewing party.
Yeah, we're having a little watch party. I'm Michelle. Hi, Tara. Thanks for reading. Hi. I was wondering about your use of the second person, your use of the you. I found it so interesting, and it's hard. I find it hard to do in my own writing. And so I guess I was just wondering what draws you to that and how you think it relates to like the thematic elements of your text.
Oh yes, the use of the second person is always like one of those conversations that pops up on literary Twitter every like 6 months or so, if any of you are on Twitter and experience that. And people get really, really worked up about second person and when to use it and when you shouldn't use it. I honestly use second person for immediacy and urgency. It's very hard to use in extended pieces. I will also use it to, if I'm adapting something from a personal experience that helps give distance from it. But I do think there's like a tendency to overuse it sometimes to say at a distance. And for instance, the piece that I read, the opening piece from the Year of the Monster, I had written in second person, and then I switched it to first person because nobody was publishing it. And I thought that was the problem, was that they were like, oh, there's another you second person. So I was looking purely at style. But, you know, content drives the form for me. But I find that the present tense second person for flash pieces, because mostly what I was reading is flash fiction, that if I'm trying to put the reader through an experience, that's when I use the second person. Yeah, that's when I tend to use it. And that's why I'm drawn to it. Like, here, let me walk you through this, through this experience. Walk yourself, not let me walk, you walk yourself.
All right, thank you, Michelle, great question. I think next up is Tyler.
Hey, thanks for coming here. I loved listening to you read some of your pieces. And then, so you actually read one of my favorite poems, the Circles and Spheres and Other Well-Rounded Objects. I kind of love like the repetition, like this is how you calculate infinity. And one of the lines that really stuck out to me was how children from broken geometries find their own symmetry outside of circles and spheres and other well-rounded objects. So you say these things like this is how you calculate infinity, but like, how do you do that? You know, you don't really provide an answer. And my question is, as someone who feels like they come from a broken geometry, as I'm sure a lot of us feel, how do we find our own symmetry, and how can we exist outside of circles and other well-rounded objects?
Oh my God, Tyler, you're gonna make me cry. I think asking that question gives you your own symmetry to have that kind of insight. That poem was really about being taught to do the impossible, right? In a way, or being told to do the impossible. And symmetry is one of those obsessions that we have, and it's not possible. It's like perfection, right? But it appeals to us. It looks nice. So talking in the abstract of how we do that, I mean, for me, I fail at that on a daily basis, but as a creative, I think trusting your job and what you're doing is what you need to be doing. That probably doesn't help, but it's easy. We live in a culture where it's really easy to look at what everybody else is doing. Everything is a feed, right? Everything is a feed. Everything is a list of accomplishments. Everything is like perfect and beautiful. And we know that it's a fiction. We know that we're looking through windows and seeing imagined lives. So, I think like reminding ourselves to participate in our own lives instead of becoming audiences to other people's lives is important. And that's where your shape emerges. At least for me, that's where it emerges, because I can become an audience member like very easily and realize I'm not participating in my own life. So yeah, but thank you for saying that about the poem. I'm so glad that line in particular touched you. That's probably my favorite section in the entire poem.
All right, thanks, Tyler. Great question. Nigel, I think, is up next with a question.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us, Tara. Really loved your work. And similar to Tyler, I really liked that poem as well. And my question was, I noticed that it seemed in a lot of the prose sections as well that they kind of bordered on poetic, or they were poetic. And I was just curious if stylistically you've ever faced pressure or direction from peers or publishers to lean in one direction or another when it comes to kind of that hybrid prose poetry.
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I don't think peers have really influenced or pressured me so much as I have either misidentified a market and submitted work to it, or that particular editor in a market was like, this is too abstract, or this needs to be more concrete, or conversely, like take out the concrete, be more abstract. But I think really like working with the right editors is really important. I don't feel so much pressure with the hybrid work. I think I've kind of just accepted that it's not super marketable and that I just like, the content dictates the form with it. But I think again, with that, like becoming an audience to somebody else and somebody else's work and their process can in a way like pollute my own perceptions of my own work. And so I could be like, oh, like I shouldn't do that. That is too poemy, right? And I'm not a poet. And it does become a lot of like self-branding, like, oh, you're a hybrid writer. Hope you have a job. 5 of them. But but yeah, I think like there are times where I feel maybe a little bit of self-pressure. But I think a lot of that comes from the confidence in my own writing. And by confidence, I mean, I can look at it and say like, oh, this is what I want it to be. This is how I want it to sound. But again, like I said, working with Barrett Warner at Galileo for this particular book was like, he's so old school. Like he, in the first draft, did handwritten notes and like overnighted them from South Carolina to me. And then we read them through on the phone, and he like obsessively read the book and like knew more about the book than I did. It felt like at times, but he was able to see what I was trying to do. So he wasn't pressuring me. Like the line in that poem where, how to not, after contemplating death in the very beginning, he's like, that feels too strong. I don't think you should keep that in there. I go, no, I really want that. And so, you know, there were times where he was making suggestions and I'm like, I'm going to double down and I'm going to keep this. And he was like, all right. So it's kind of like a staring contest at times.
Well, I mean, Tara, you say that you feel like maybe the work is not as like marketable, but you have a lot of work out there. You're pretty widely published. You've got a couple chapbooks now, a book coming out. So maybe you found something that works.
I found some indie presses that I really like who put out stuff that I like too. So that's the whole, being a match is a really important thing.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I think we have another question from our watch party.
Hi, my name's Arnisha. This question, thank you so much, by the way. This is amazing. This kind of like piggybacks a little bit to what Nigel was talking about, but do you ever feel pressure, because I'm assuming you got your MFA in fiction, do you ever feel pressure to like only categorize yourself as a fiction writer or flash fiction? Not like, how do you so seamlessly, like, or it seems like as a reader, float in and out of these different genres?
That's a great question. I mean, yeah, because my emphasis was fiction, and for a long time, like, I don't write poems, I write fiction. And to be honest, I got my MFA in 2012. I was 6 months pregnant when I had my daughter. So there was like a lot of like not writing that happened for a while. And I was like committed. I'm like, I worked in the film industry, I write scripts and I write fiction. And then like a little poem would kind of wander its way into my life. And I'm like, no. Because yeah, it's like the self-branding thing. But I think reading a lot of work that I liked, I read a lot of hybrid work, and engaging with a lot of other writers and lit mags and people who are pushing boundaries. And actually a lot of the faculty when I was at San Diego State were very much like, I took prose poems with Marilyn Chin. Marilyn Chin's not there. Is she still there? Is she? No. Okay.
She's
so
retired.
Like, yeah. So she's still putting out great stuff. I read her in N Block the other day. But yeah, like taking that kind of stuff, I was really early exposed to it in the MFA. But I think, yeah, sometimes I write so slowly. Like I give my students prompts in class and I give them, 15, 20 minutes to write or whatever. And I'm just like, I could never write this fast. And I'm always blown away by them because I am glacial. So I'll write something and then I'll look back at it and it'll be a poem or really poemy. And then I'll put the prosy stuff in there. And I'm like, I need something concrete. We need something to weigh it down. But yeah, I think like I started to just sort of abandon that I'm a flash fiction writer. I write prose poetry, I write fiction, I write scripts, because the branding for me doesn't really matter. And a lot of people are shedding the branding too. It's becoming much more fluid. I see some of those writers on here too, in here.
All right, thank you. Great question. I wanted to get to a couple of the questions from the chat. And there were a few questions that were kind of related, wanting to know a little bit about your process, and more specifically, how do you carve out the time to get these works published in the midst of being an associate professor, a mother, a wife? I mean, all of these hats that you wear.
It's just too many hats. Well, to be fair, the book that's coming out next year, that's the full length, took me, by the time it comes out, it will have been 13 years from the first story published to the actual publication. when I signed the contract, it was almost 10 years from when the first one came out. So there was a lot of like living life going on in the time after MFA and writing and figuring out, because I left the film industry like very, very abruptly after like some horrible things happened. And I was trying to find my identity. So I was adjuncting like nonstop also for the last 9 years. This is my first year at the tenure track position, which I told my husband, I'm like, this is the last time I'm going to apply for a tenure track because this is BS. Like, I'm not living like this anymore. And so it ended up being for a film position, which is like a perfect fit, even if it's driving me nuts. But I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? To answer that question. Long-winded answer. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to write. I can't write at night because at night, everybody's used me up and I'm done. And in the morning, I'm still close to the dream state. And the world does not need me at 4 o'clock in the morning. My cats need me, that's about it. And my coffee machine, and that's it, like done. And I did that for like the last 3.5, 4 years. I've been waking up, except this year's been kind of off, but that's my mojo time. And I don't watch a lot of TV. Like I have to sacrifice and my students now are like, hey, did you watch this show? And I'm like, no, man, I got to catch up on that at some point because I'm like a decade behind everybody else right now. But yeah, it's hard to make time when you're full-time. I also have a really supportive spouse. That helps a lot. If I were to tell him like, I need to go write for 4 days, he'd say, oh, okay, I'll take care of everything. So that's very important. I'm very blessed to have that. But it's the making time. When I worked at 2.5 Men at Warner Brothers, I worked for a producer who, he asked me about my writing and I'm like, I don't have any time to write. And he goes, that's bullshit, Tara. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to write and you should make your own time. And I was like, who wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning? But it's right. Like you have to make the time, even if it's like 10 minutes, I carry a notebook everywhere with me. I've carried one everywhere with me for the last 3 months and I haven't written a single thing in it in the last 3 months. Like the idea that you have to write every single day, no, you don't have to. And once I set that aside, I felt so much better. I'm like, oh, I don't have to write every day. It's okay to go 3 months without writing anything. It's just like getting through all of the you should be doing and this is what it should look like. And so for Tara, it works to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That means I have to do that. I can't do that. No, that's just what works for me. You don't have to write every day. You need to live your life so you have material to write.
Yes, that is great advice. There was another question in the chat wanting to know a little bit more about blood histories and the kind of the style. And I wondering about like the font choices and the layout, was that your choice? Was that Barrett? Was that sort of a collaboration? And maybe if you could speak to just the fact that it's kind of laid out like this CD booklet and the stories have times on them like songs would. So
that was, so the concept of it being, so Adam Robinson did the design for the book. He also does the website design for Bending Genres. And Barrett, when he read it, he was like, yeah, he's just so funny. It's like, I'm really feeling a music vibe. And so I was in the process of making book trailers because I was getting back into doing so. So I made this book trailer for the book. It's more like a postcard trailer. And I showed it to him and Barrett goes, oh my God. He's like, it wasn't immediate, but he says, there's 2 pictures in that of a woman. There's a front of her and the back of her. And I see a CD, so it came from that. And he said he saw the CD case layout. And the picture was when I took 15 years ago when my car broke down in the middle of the desert of a friend who was with me. So yeah. And from that, we just worked with Adam Robinson. And then, so Adam designed and chose the fonts and I did have a lot of say in it. They also intentionally included large margins on the inside so you didn't have to break the book spine, which I was like, I've never seen that before, but yeah, the process was really neat. And I think they did a good job of making it, clean and having an interesting shape. So that was fun, but we did go through, I think, like 5 or 6 different covers and fonts. And Barrett was very particular about the font. Like Adam got super crazy with the font where it almost looked like a Boys in the Hood cover. Initially, the font was like old English style. And Barrett's like, no, that's not going to work. And I'm like, I always wanted to, be a part of the hip hop community at some point. So yeah.
Very cool. Well, that's, I think, one of the benefits too of working with like in a smaller publisher sometimes, that you have more of a say in the design, the cover, the layout overall. So that's really nice.
Unsolicited is that way too. We already have the cover. We've had the cover for that since April, and they were great at contacting me with like, okay, here's 6 concepts. Which do you hate the least? And then working with that. So yeah, so it's been a good experience in that sense with both of them, but they're very, very different publishing processes with those 2 presses.
Yeah, would you mind speaking on that a little bit? Just because it is interesting, right, that you said, that was actually done first, but you've had to wait a few years for the book to actually come out.
Yeah, so I submitted to Unsolicited Press. I actually submitted The Year of the Monster under a different title, and then I queried them after 9 months of them having the manuscript and it being in progress. Actually, I don't think they used submittable, so it wasn't on submittable, but because I directly submitted to them. They're an indie press out of Portland, and they ended up responding a couple days later. So they had the book for 9 months before they offered me a contract. And so then 2 years and 9 months after that, you can kind of do the math. It's like 3.5 years altogether from submission query to actual publication. And they have a really detailed editorial schedule that they put out over that period of time. Like I just got the marketing packet a couple weeks ago. And so with them, it's very much like you have 6 months, and this was right before COVID, you have 6 months to complete your edits on what you want the book to be before we go through our edits. And I'm like, oh, 6 months, nothing. And then everything shut down and my kids were home and I was like, oh my God, I have no time to do anything. So I did it. And then, so we worked through that with Galileo Press. I submitted the chap to them. And I think after like 5 or 6 months, they picked it up. And with Barrett, it was very much a like hands-on. We actually worked on the book before the official contract to kind of see if we would work together well, because he liked it, but he wasn't sure how open I was to suggestions for editing and whatnot, especially since the pieces had already been published. But they're much smaller. They don't sell through Amazon. I don't think Unsolicited sells through Amazon either. They are very much like a no Amazon, anti-Amazon distributor. So but it's, yeah, the process with both was very, very different, but I think with what both books needed too. Again, like Barrett, I kind of just felt like this, like Brenna Womer, who blurbed the book, as you said, she's like, it's like you're in a relationship with him in a way, not like a romantic relationship, but you're so intimately connected with work where it's like you're fighting over a word, not a word, but like you're not fighting, but it's like this word. He said, stop starting your sentences with when. And oh my God, has that changed everything about my writing? He says, when you begin a sentence with when, you are separating the reader from the present moment. And you do it all the time. And I was like, God, Barrett, stop teaching me to be a better writer. So yeah, it was great. So that process has been great. The editing process with Unsolicited is great too, not as in depth and emotional as Barrett, but it's been good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think, when you consider some advice from the writing greats, they always say that it's important to have an editor that you can trust and an editor that's not afraid to, tell you need to stop starting your sentences with when, but who's also, supportive of your work as well. So that's wonderful that you had a good working relationship.
Yeah, I mean, Barrett worked so hard. Like he and the rest of the staff, he's not the only one at Galileo, but everybody at Galileo, worked so hard. And especially during COVID, it's been, you don't get like a real in-person launch or anything like that, which is fine. But but yeah, so I'm very grateful. And I'm so grateful that your students and, showed up to the reading, and I'm sure they had to, and to be invited as well. It's really, really humbling, very humbling experience.
Well, we absolutely enjoyed the experience of reading the book and discussing it, and of hearing you read some of the pieces as well as some newer stuff as well. And I know it's very late over there and you have to get up at 4 a.m. to write. So we won't
Not
keep you for much
tomorrow.
longer, but I was hoping we could maybe end with a little advice, because you really have been quite prolific and constant with publishing, just pieces in journals, anthologies. So if you could give some advice for folks who are looking to send out their work.
Yeah, send it out when it's ready. But I often have felt pressure and have sent stuff out before it was ready. But I think for the writing part, write what you want to read is what I always say. Write what you want to read. Connect with the writing community too. You have one at San Diego State. Graduating, I know a lot of people who don't stay connected and they lose a writing community. Writing's not done, it's not done in an isolation chamber, and especially when it comes to publishing. With the publishing portion, because the writing portion, write what you want to read, take the time that you need. It's not a race. It is not a race. But with the publishing part, really obviously investigate the publishers where you're sending your work, read what they publish, and don't feel pressured to cater your work to a publisher. My favorite story that's coming out in The Year of the Monster was rejected like 40 times, I think. And it's still my favorite story in the collection. It did come out, and Malarkey Books has a King Lud's Rag. It's just like a very, very small run print zine that it came out in. And it was sort of like they had a spot and they needed to fill it, kind of a situation, but which was great. Like, I'm not complaining, but nobody wanted that, but I still wanted it. And so I put it in the book, and it's in the book. So I know a lot of writers who have stuff that they love that. I have a novel that I wrote over 8 years that didn't get published. That's in here. That was part of my MFA thesis. So I always said, I'm never going to be that person who throws away a novel, who throws away pages. That's not going to be me. Well, I don't think that one's going to go anywhere. I did harvest it for parts though. So, and made short story. The title story, The Year of the Monster, is actually like a very reduced version of the novel. So, but yeah, write what you want to read and just read a lot. And don't get discouraged. Everybody writes it. And you're going to read a lot of crappy stuff too. You're like, oh, that story sucks and it's published. There's a lot of shitty stuff that's published, like a lot. I forget where I saw it, and this will be the last thing because I know I'm talking a lot, but somebody had said, and I can't remember if it was on Twitter because I spend way too much time on there, but it's not about how good stuff is. Oftentimes when people are getting published a lot, it's the persistence. So not saying to not be good, but be persistent.
Well, yes, persistent until we get good. Or I like what you said, write what you want to read. That's really important. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tara. Thank you for your time. And we are so proud of you. I mean, I know that always sounds like cheesy, but I always love to see an SDSU alum with multiple publications. I mean, even one publication, but you are doing the thing. So congratulations on the book coming out next year. Everyone, you need to get The Year of the Monster in next September.
Yes, promote it now. It's a year away.
I know. Hey, well, we're still kind of in lockdown. What else are we gonna do, right?
There's a meme. There's a meme with Grogu, Baby Yoda, and then regular Yoda, where it's like the Baby Yoda side is authors when they sign their publishing contract, and then the Yoda side is authors when their book comes out. So it's like, woohoo! There's only one more year left until it comes out. I'll be reading like 2. But, yeah.
Yes. And thank you to all of you for attending, for your great questions, and also for staying up late with us this evening. Get home safely from your wherever you are in your offices and your bedrooms. But thanks again to Tara. And how about another, like a real round of applause?
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys. Made my whole month right now. Oh, and feel free to email me if you have any questions about anything. I'll give Megan has my email if any of your students want to email me about anything.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, I will definitely keep an eye out. Let me know. And then I just threw the link for our YouTube channel into the chat. So if you want to go back and revisit Tara's reading or any of the other readings and great things we have on there, please check us out and subscribe. And thank you all again. And thank you, Tara. It was wonderful to see you again.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who took time out of their lives to come and listen and ask questions.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.